Hi. So today I wanted to make a video on how exactly does an AI become biased. And I can honestly make this video about 10 seconds long. An AI becomes biased because people become biased. End of video if you want to end the discussion there. But an AI can become biased at any point in the process. A human can introduce bias to the AI at any point in the process. To dive into how an AI can possibly become biased, we first need to explore how it's possible that a human could become biased. So, first thing we need to look at is nature and nurture. For humans, this has been a known psychological concept among humans since the dawn of modern psychology. At that time, it was framed as nature versus nurture. As science started to gain a firmer understanding in these areas, the debate began to shift away from nature versus nurture to nature plus nurture. Most modern scientific debate on the topic frames the debate in this context before arguing the individual nuances of it all. In order to properly frame how bias could be introduced to an AI, we first need to reframe our common understanding of what AI is and how it operates. AI is not inherently a tool, a machine, or a calculator. AI is more thinking, an assistant, a brain. Just like any other brain, its ultimate composition is a result of nature and nurture. If you introduce bias from the DNA level, you'll have bias. If you introduce bias through exposure, through nurture, you'll have bias. Beyond the hardware components, an AI could be thought of to be fundamentally composed of a few different elements: a framework, a model or models, and data. The framework dictates, let's say, the DNA of an AI, the hard coded upper limits and thresholds. The model plays a part in shaping the personality of the AI and controls how the AI will learn about the world. Data is what an AI learns about the world. Data is nurture to an AI. So now that we've gone over this concept of nature versus nurture and how that very specifically applies to AI as well, let's talk about how you can introduce bias in the model. The first significant place that bias can come in with AI to me is in the model itself. The model is ultimately written by a person or a group of people. Those people inherently have biases of their own, whether they're implicitly known or explicitly known. It's impossible, or it's possible up front then for someone to transfer those same biases directly into their model. There's a few ways beyond simply having implicit or explicit bias yourself, though, where bias can be introduced to AI just on the model level. The next area would be within the algorithms themselves. It's possible that the algorithms the model uses are simply biased in and of themselves or produce biased results. Not because anyone forced the algorithm to, but simply because that's what it does. As you should see developing as a theme throughout, bias can be implicitly or explicitly introduced. Just because bias is introduced doesn't mean that there has to be malicious intent behind it. Bias could be introduced with positive intention behind it, or even no intention behind it. Bringing this back to nature and nurture, bias within the model itself would be a nature argument. The DNA itself of the AI is hard coded with biases in these instances. The only way to remove that bias, then, or to not have it reflected as an output, is to hard code it out. To essentially train the AI on why the bias is wrong, bad, and should not be weighed. Next, let's take a look at bias in the data itself. So, if bias in the model is the nature side of this equation, bias in the data is the nurture side of the equation. If you feed an AI biased data, it learns to be biased. Its observations about the world become biased. Just like with the nature side of the equation, those biases can be introduced in implicit or explicit ways. It's often very easy to introduce implicit bias within data. If you feed data only from the United States, for example, that data is inherently culturally biased. There's no inherent judgment call in pointing that out. It's merely a statement of fact and an observation that has to be made and recognized before further debate or progress can be made. Similarly, if all the data is written by males, the data will inherently have biases that are reflective of males. If the data is more representative of older people than the general population as a whole, the data would be biased in that area. The best way to combat bias in data is simply through sheer volume of data and breadth of sources, doing all that you can to increase the diversity of the data sets so that no individual biases could be disproportionately reflected within the data set as a whole is the ultimate goal. In practice, this becomes increasingly expensive to train. There can be significant limitations on actually finding the data. Then, humans would need to catalog and tag the data depending on the framework and model and any other taxing issues that could arise. In conclusion, AI is just like people in a lot of ways. They're impacted by the nature and nurture argument. They can be built to be biased, or they can be trained to be biased. They are ultimately built by people, trained by people, and utilize data created by and that is about people. Just like your kid would likely have a reflection of a lot of your individual ideologies and biases, so will your AI. Bias is something that we have all to tackle within our lives. At some point, we'll feel unnecessary bias towards someone or something. Similarly, we'll experience unnecessary bias at some points in our lives. If you don't ever want to have that end up being picked up on and interpreted by an AI, then that starts at the individual level. Thank you for watching. If you like this content and would like more AI-related content, especially content geared towards the ethics of AI, then be sure to like and subscribe. And also feel free to check out my website, TuringsSolutions.com. Thank you very much.